Hello everyone. A big thank you to all who have subscribed to the channel. I appreciate you so much. To the people who have not yet subscribed, I'm asking you to do so. Thank you. Let us carry on with today's conversation and thought. The recent riots in England have been driven by a combination of factors, including misinformation, far-right activism, and anti-immigration sentiment. While some individuals involved may exhibit a sense of entitlement, it is important to recognize that entitlement is just one potential factor among many. Entitlement in this context might manifest as a belief that one's own views or rights are more important than those of others, leading to actions that disregard the law or the well-being of others. However, the motivations behind such large-scale unrest are often complex and multifaceted, involving social, economic, and political issues. Understanding the root causes of these riots can help in addressing the underlying issues and preventing future occurrences. So one might ask, what are some of the factors contributing to the UK's unrest and riots? The top answer would probably be misinformation, false information spread online. My second statement would be, the far-right activism groups have been actively involved in organizing and inciting violence, using the situation to promote their anti-immigration agendas. These group of people need more than a masterclass education. They need to revisit the British history wholesomely. Shahid Bolsen will give them a touch of education on the video that I will share with you. Let us continue. There is a significant anti-immigration sentiment among some groups, which has been exacerbated by the spread of misinformation. The far-right groups have used the incident to promote xenophobic views. What a shame. These riots have also been driven by wider Islamophobic and racist sentiments, with mosques, hotel housing asylum seekers being torched, and not to mention the ethnic minorities being targeted. Socioeconomic factors does come into play too. Underlying socioeconomic issues, such as unemployment, poverty, homelessness, and lack of opportunities, has contributed to feelings of frustrations and anger, which has been expressed through riots. The long-standing issues related to social inequalities and perceived injustices have never been adequately addressed. These historical grievances have surfaced in the current climate of unrest. This is actually a displaced form of anger. This sort of frustration should be directed to the government and not immigrants. There is no justification in attacking immigrants whatsoever. Then, there are people who totally resentful to the existence of immigrants regardless which color, but especially blacks and brown. This is a hate based on a person's skin and nothing else. This ignorance makes no sense to the majority of people. How about distrust in authorities? I reckon a perceived bias by the police and media has also played a role in the unrest, leaving some communities feeling marginalized and unfairly treated. All these factors and even more have created a volatile situation, leading to widespread violence and unrest. Addressing these underlying issues is crucial for restoring peace and preventing future incidents. Just going back to the people who believe they are so entitled. The centuries of entitlement are over. Entitlement is a personality trait where individuals believe they deserve special treatment, privileges, or recognition without necessarily earning it. Cultural factors have also played into this nightmare. Societal norms and cultural values have also played into it. In some cultures, certain groups may feel entitled due to the historical or social privileges. There is the underlying cruelty and mistrust at the core of the British culture and mindset, expertly cultivated over hundreds of years ago. Again, I would like to reiterate, not all British people feel entitled or are bad to other minorities. There are still noble and great people existing on Earth. How about if we all tried to cultivate integrity, impartiality, respect, honesty, and objectivity? Please let us take a listen to Rashid. He is a straight-talking kind of guy. All what he is saying is factual. However, at times the truth is very painful. Let us go, Rashid.
Now, I've seen so many videos, so many testimonies coming out of the UK from black people, from Asians, from Arabs, and so on, all British citizens, as well as from immigrants, of course. But so many people expressing like trauma and shock, disappointment, grief over these riots and these attacks. Frankly, I don't know why. I mean, I don't know how you could have ever convinced yourself that you're living in a healthy, civilized society to where any of this should shock you. Look, these English people have felt like their Englishness was being deteriorated. You know, their English culture, their English heritage, their English Anglo so-called civilization, they felt it was being marginalized, minimized, and undermined by the presence of non-whites, and primarily of Muslims, the presence of Muslims. So what you're seeing with these riots is just them reasserting their culture, their heritage, their so-called civilization at its most raw, its most honest, the most primal expression, which is hateful, primitive, and violent. That's their culture. That's their culture, and they're telling you loud and clear. Why, these are festivals for them. You call it riots, but for them, these are festivals of Anglo-British culture and tradition. That's who they are. They're not tolerant people. They're not multiculturalists. They're monoculturalists, and they always have been. I mean, you can tie a monkey's tail to a stick to make it go straight, but the moment that stick comes loose, the tail will curl up again. You can't artificially change a society. No, you can't artificially change the nature of a society. And you should already know. You should already know the nature of that society. Since it was almost exclusively because of the violent, tyrannical, supremacist nature of that society that the countries that your parents came from, your grandparents came from, and so on, that's why their countries became so unlivable that they had to immigrate to that miserable island to begin with. I mean, how did you think that people who were brutal colonizers and enslavers in your country were somehow completely different when they got home? I mean, don't you know that the highest domestic violence statistics are in the homes of police officers? No one is savage on the job, but gentle at home. They were in your countries, robbing your countries, pillaging your countries, destroying your countries, because they thought you deserved it. And they look at you the same way now. They look at you on the streets of London, on the streets of Brighton, on the streets of Manchester, Bristol, Liverpool, and Cardiff. They look at you the same way that they looked at you when you were on indigo plantations and when they were starving you to death in Bengal. They look at you the same way that they looked at you when you were on tobacco and sugar and cotton plantations in the Caribbean. The same way that they looked at you when they were stealing your lands in Kenya, stealing your lands in Zimbabwe and everywhere else, and forcing you into mines and forcing you onto plantations to deliver all of your natural wealth into their hands. I'm telling you, they look at you the same way now. When you're on their streets, they look at you the same way as they looked at you when you were in your countries of origin. They hunted you over there, and they'll hunt you over here. In fact, they'll hunt you even more savagely when they're on their home turf. I mean, do you think that a wolf is more dangerous when he's outside and less dangerous when you're right there in his den? Well, everybody knows that a wolf is even more violent when he thinks he's protecting his den than when he's out hunting. So I don't see why you're surprised. I don't see why you're shocked. I mean, it would be different if your history with them was different. You know, if they had come into your countries, if they had come into your lands as traders and as merchants and just did business with you in a respectable, civilized way, but that's not what they did, is it? So, I mean, if you're the victim of a brutal home invasion, where you get assaulted and robbed in your own house, what makes you think that the criminal who did that to you is going to welcome you as a guest when you show up at his door? So yes, they felt that their culture was getting pushed aside. And now they're holding parades all across the UK to celebrate who they are and to remind you who they are and to remind everyone else who they are. And listen, I'm well aware that this is orchestrated, that it is calculated. I'm well aware that what's happening in the UK right now is all part of the destabilization project that has been in progress for at least as long as the Ukraine war has been in progress. I'm the first person to point that out. I'm the first person to talk about that. I know that's what's happening because I said it would happen. And it's going to get worse. I know that Tommy Robinson is on the payroll. I know he's an agent of disruption, but he's not the only one. I know that's why they specifically choose to hold their Anglo Pride parades in heavily immigrant and minority areas, precisely to inflame. And precisely so that English people can see the police crack down on white nationalists. That's just to promote the white nationalist narrative. You know, if immigrant and so-called minority offenders get lighter sentences than whites, the whole point of that is just to advance that narrative, to stoke resentment and racial hatred. Everyone knows that Tommy Robinson is paid by higher-ups. Well, those higher-ups are exactly that. This racial and ethnic strife is sought by the elites of the society. Because, like I said, time and time again, Europe, including the UK, is slated to be nothing but a conflict zone. But the point is, they're able to do this because that racism, that white supremacy, that brutal, violent heritage and culture is their heritage and culture. And they never rehabilitated themselves from it. They never civilized from it. They have been barbarians for millennia. And that's what they are today. To one extent or another, all they did was medicate those hateful, violent tendencies. They sedated it. They treated the symptoms, just like the pharmaceutical industry does, just like they do with illness. You know, they never cure you. They just medicate the symptoms so that it'll be dormant without ever actually treating the underlying condition. Well, that's the same way that they've dealt with their perverse hatred and their racism and their penchant for violence. They just put a Band-Aid on a tumor. They plaster over a cyst with foundation, makeup, and blush so that you can't see it. Or anyway, so that you can't tell whether what you are seeing is what you think you're seeing. You know how they talk about microaggressions and implicit bias and all that? Well, that's what I'm talking about. It's like radiation that escapes through a landfill of toxic waste because you never actually got rid of the waste. You just tried to bury it. But no matter how deep you bury it, it's still there. And it's going to come out one way or another. Look, I'm a Westerner. My ancestors were Irish and German. But I don't feel any conflict in acknowledging the reality that the West has always been and still is barbaric. You know, there was a Sahabi named Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, and his whole tribe, before Islam, they were highway robbers. They were bandits, thieves, murderers, and they were renowned for that. When they embraced Islam, they didn't pretend that they didn't have that history. In fact, having that history just demonstrated how much Islam changed them. They were no more defined by what they were before Islam, nor did they identify or defend what they were before Islam any more than I am defined by or identify with or defend the history of the West. You have to tell the truth. I mean, the irony, of course, is that these riots, this is all part of a destabilization campaign by white Westerners against white Western countries. And these people still want to believe in some kind of white Western fraternity. Your forefathers were Anglo serfs and peasants used and abused by Anglo aristocrats. And that's basically the same situation now. You are defending a so-called culture, a so-called civilization that treated your ancestors like animals, treated your women like property, and your children as nothing but expendable drones for workhouses and mines. You enslaved each other before you ever started enslaving anyone else. It's a miserable, disgraceful, inhuman heritage. I mean, I'm American. And there only are Americans because white Europeans were so vicious and so tyrannical to each other that whoever could escape ran away. My people went to America because you were starving them in the potato famine. White on white oppression. That's your whole history before you became multicultural oppressors. That's what I mean. What you did elsewhere, you were already doing at home. What you did to other people, you were first doing to each other. You know, when the colonizers first went to Ghana, they were flabbergasted to discover that every house, every home, had a toilet that was cleaned every day. Meanwhile, you still had your people defecating in public in collective cesspits that never got cleaned. Yes, you never cleaned them. You just buried it and dug a new one. See how you do? That's a habit with you. Just bury it and then start somewhere else. That's basically the origin of America, if you think about it. You just moved away from the cesspit of Europe to start a new cesspit on the other side of the Atlantic. I'm telling you because you need to know. I'm not telling you to denigrate you. I mean, how are you going to be uplifted if you don't know how low you are now and how low you've always been? Westerners don't know the difference between standing on the shore and drowning because, wallahi, you are drowning and you're being drowned, actually. Your own so-called culture, your own so-called civilization is drowning you. And you're out here in the streets of the UK defending the culture that's drowning you and that drowned your forefathers. Well, you don't know how much in common you actually have with the immigrants that flee to your country from their countries because your country ruined their countries. Because the same so-called civilization that ruined their countries has been ruining you for hundreds of years. You need to wash the makeup off of that cyst, rip the Band-Aid off of that tumor, and start actually trying to heal yourselves. And you need to charge the doctor who never did anything but cover up your sickness, cover up your deformity, cover up your mutation instead of treating it. Because he never cared about your health in the first place. And you need to charge that doctor, which is your so-called civilization, you need to charge that doctor with malpractice. Charge your civilization, so-called, with malpractice. I'm saying you need to direct your anger at the people who are trying to direct your anger at anyone but themselves. Because they're the ones you should be mad at. You should direct your anger at all these people who are lying to you about your so-called civilization, telling you to be proud and defensive about a culture that has done nothing but keep you perverted, hateful, violent, and criminal for centuries. Because you have a right to be worthwhile human beings. And your so-called civilization has let you down. It's let you down badly. It hasn't just let you down developmentally, morally, spiritually, ethically, and so on. It's even let you down in the most practical of terms. You know, the very thing that you like to think that you excel in. You like to think that you're the most practical and efficient people on the earth. But look at your system. Your so-called civilization built a system, built a society that's literally making you go extinct. Your materialism, your atheism, your consumerism, your urbanization, your worship of money has created a society that cannot even perpetuate itself anymore. How practical is that? I'm telling you, you're out of your minds. Nothing about the way that you approach the world, nothing about the way you approach life makes any sense. It's killing you. And you're so insane that you're singing God Save the King instead of saving yourselves.